Yes, that's right. It's Joe here live for Joyrider TV, back with some very interesting Q&A. All of your most pressing catamaran sailing questions answered. Yeah, looking forward to this one. I've got some good topics in the preloaded department. But before we steam in with, sorry, let's have a bit more of that. Yeah, not quite so much of that. Just there, I believe, is the sweet spot. Yeah, so very exciting from my end of things right now is I have just launched the brand new totaljoyrider.com website. Oh yes. So if at any point you feel that you could multitask, feel free to go and have a look at that while the Q&A is underway. And you could give me some live feedback on what you reckon. I've been working on that bad boy all week, which has, I'm afraid, meant that I haven't got, that's why it's been a little bit quiet from my end of things this week. Other news from Vasiliki Bay is it has been raining pretty much consistently the whole week, which has also led to this bit of productivity in the studio, getting the what you call it, the website done. That's it. Yes, there we go. So hello to everybody who's watching live, and hello to everybody who's watching later on. I think by now everybody knows how this works, so I don't have to explain nothing. So let's steam in with the first preloaded question, and I can see that that Richard, who asked the question, is actually in the live chat already. Richard's in Dubai. Looking forward to hearing more of your gems of wisdom. Oh yes. So Richard's question is what I am going to call, whether it's right or not, I don't care because it sounds pretty cool. I'm going to call it the upwind jib telltales paradox. You can let me know after we've gone through this whether it is actually allowed to call it that. What we're talking about is following the jib telltales when we're sailing upwind. So if we have our on the jib, so if this is just a little section of our jib over here, just to keep it out of the way, if we've got all out of scale, so if we've got like a see-through window so that we can see our telltales, and then let's say what would it be? The red telltale would be on the leeward side like this, and for port and starboard, you see, this is solid gold, and then a green telltale on the windward sail. And as we know, that the sweet spot for our telltales is to have them both flying straight backwards like this. Is that a good starting point? So when we're sailing upwind, the way that, just to reframe this a little bit as well, what we're talking about is our upwind sailing angle for boats which have a jib. So what we know is when we're sailing upwind, we pull the jib in tight and we steer the boat by watching the telltales on the jib. Agreed? I think so, at least to some sort of extent. And so what is this jib telltales paradox of which we speak? Well, what it is in light winds, it's not really going to happen. Like up to about 5, 6 knots of wind, we're not so worried. What we're going to do is keep the jib telltales flying straight back like this at all times. However, if we were to do that when the wind started getting stronger, what would happen is as the wind starts getting stronger, perhaps we're able just to lift the hull a little bit. Then what would naturally happen as we start going faster is the inside telltale is going to start to lift as we start going faster. Because as we start going faster, what's going to happen is something else that perhaps we already know, or if we don't, this is really good knowledge, is the wind that we're sailing the boat on is called the apparent wind. And that apparent wind is a combination of the true wind, the induced wind that we create by, and sorry, just these two winds actually. The true wind, which is the wind that is blowing, let's say, the induced wind, which is the wind we create by going forwards, and what we are actually sailing on is the apparent wind, which is kind of halfway between these two wind directions. So what happens as we start going faster? The induced wind, this bad boy, gets more because we're going faster. So what happens when we get more induced wind is the apparent wind shifts more round onto the nose, because the relative to the strength of the true wind, we're creating more induced wind. So the apparent wind is going to come more round onto the nose of the boat, which is going to make our inside telltale lift. Yes, is everybody with me so far? I hope so. So what that means is if we then want to keep this inside telltale flying straight back, what we're going to have to do is bear away. In fact, let's have many boats. So we're going to have to bear away, perhaps just a little bit, but the direction of the true wind is still the same that it was before we bore away. So what happens when we bear away a little bit? Answers on a postcard. No, I'm going to jump in. Is we're going to start going faster, because as we know, as we turn away from this upwind course towards a beam reach, we start sailing faster. What's going to happen when we start sailing faster? Yes, you've guessed it. We're going to create even more induced wind. And what is that going to do to our apparent wind angle? Yes, it's going to come round again, kind of onto the nose more. And what's that going to do to our telltales? Well, the inside telltale is going to lift, perhaps even more. So what are we going to have to do there? Yes, you've guessed it. We're going to have to bear away more if we want to keep this inside telltale flying straight back and not lifting. So what's happening is our induced wind is getting more. The wind increases, that is lifting the inside telltale, and then to keep that inside telltale flying, we're having to bear away, making us go faster, which is nice. We like that, but our induced wind gets even more, which means if we want to keep that inside telltale flying, we have to bear away more, and then our induced wind gets even more. My arrow went a little bit off piece there. And then our induced wind gets even more, which is how when we're sailing upwind, we have to bear away there again to keep that inside telltale flying, which is how we actually end up on a beam reach, but thinking we're sailing upwind because we've got the jib in tight, the jib telltales are flying nicely, but and then the question arises, why is it that the boats that we're racing against or the other boats that are out on the water are sailing upwind in a completely different direction to us? They're not going to be going as fast, but they're certainly going to be sailing closer to the wind. So this is what I am calling the jib telltales upwind paradox, because what we have to do is we have to decide at some point, this is the angle that we're sailing upwind. So if we want to continue sailing this angle, we need to allow the inside telltale on the jib to lift. That is the solution. So rather than keeping that going at all times, we need to start allowing it to lift when there's enough wind, basically to have a good flow of water around the rudders. That is a good guide. Or when the windward hull just starts just kind of twitching a little bit, that is the wind strength when we need to start allowing this inside telltale to lift. And that is what is going to give us a good upwind course. So there we go. So this is also one of the reasons why sometimes people would claim, this is a claim, that they've pitch poled going upwind. The only way that you would actually pitch pole going, if you were sailing truly upwind, the only way that you'd pitch pole would be if you stuck the nose of the boat into a wave which is going in a weird direction or something, and then perhaps the people on the boat on the trapeze weren't actually paying attention to what was going on and went swinging round the front because the boat suddenly slowed down, and then it would actually be the weight of the people on the boat which is causing the pitch pole. Very rare. If you watched the exceptional footage from the Hobie 14 North American Championships back in April, you will have seen a certain chap from Joyrider TV. You will have seen this guy stick the nose in and pitch pole on an upwind leg of the course. But at the time when I stacked it, when I pitch poled, I wasn't actually sailing upwind. I'd stuck the nose in because I'd bore away onto a bit of a beam reach just for a second to try to avoid a lobster pot, but I didn't ease enough main sheet, and not being quite so experienced on the Hobie 14, I thought it would respond more like a 16, which it didn't. Stuck the nose in and I was swimming. So that could happen. Or the nose goes in and the crew goes flying forward. But all other claims of pitch poling going upwind is because we've ended up on a beam reach. We're probably still trapezing in the upwind position, which means one more gust, bow goes in. Oh my goodness, how did that happen? And also, you're quite likely to still have your mainsail in the position for upwind sailing, thinking, "Course, this is getting a bit overpowered. Of course, she's going a bit bows down. Yeah, it's because you want to reach." So let the inside telltale lift, and then you can sail upwind, even when it's windy. Or as it gets very windy, you might have to let the inside telltale go pretty much vertical, like this. On certain boats, to get the boat under control when it's windy on an upwind course, you might even have to allow just this front part of the jib, here, to actually flap a little bit, or backwind, because we need to sail very close to the wind to stop this paradox from starting to happen. So there we go. That is the answer to part one of Richard's question. Sorry, just having a read here, ended up on a beam reach while trying to sail. Yes, there we go. Could you explain that again sometime? Yes, I think we've just done that. Well done. That's a good question. I do enjoy a bit of the upwind beam reaching. All right, so we'll just come on to part two of your question shortly, Rich. But before that, I'm going to check in with everybody who's checking in live today. So first, we've got Mark and Janet from a cold and wet Ohio, USA. Yeah, it does appear that the seasons have changed. As I said here on the Greek island of Lefkos, it's perhaps not too cold, but wet. It is as wet as an otter's pocket, so I'm told. And that is pretty wet. So, yeah, it's been raining a lot, which is pretty necessary because it hadn't actually rained since May, which did mean things were drying up quite a lot. Okay, so as I said, we've got Richard on board in Dubai. We've got Lee on board in Clearwater, Florida. Hello, Lee. Benny's with us in Sweden. Shopping listen today. Had to go soon. Okay. Well, hope you have a good day. Or I suppose you're on a similar time zone to I am here in Greece. So hope you've had a good day. All right, we got Max on board somewhere near Rosenheim, Germany, hoping to get some 17 knots of wind on Sunday on a chilly Lake Simsee in Germany. Nice. Stephen's with us for his Friday sailing chat fix. Nice. Glad to be able to supply such a platform for such a fix. I think that it is certainly one of the healthier of the fixes that goes on a Friday night. I'll certainly be partaking of a glass of the other type later on once we finish. Navi's with us. Hello, Navi. Frank's with us also in Clearwater, Florida. Frank, do you know Lee? Lee, do you know Frank? Just interested to know when two people seem to be in the same place. All right, Peter's with us also in Sweden, expecting our first snowfall next week. So de-rigging the tornado beforehand. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely last Sunday I did what I thought would probably be the last bit of sailing that I'll do this year here in Vasiliki. I know you're thinking, but you said it's warm, but there's no wind. That's the thing. And so the Tornado Bad Boy 94 is now parked outside my house up a hill. And the 16 Bad Boy 95 is masts down. And I did go out sailing last Sunday and filmed what I'd been trying to get round to filming for quite some time, which is, this is what I taped, was it was a complete guide to catamaran sailing for somebody who sailed before, but perhaps not so much on the catamaran. And this guide takes you from, I've just had a boat delivered on a trailer, so mast down, all the way through to rigging the boat up, getting the boat out, and then going sailing, and then coming back in, putting the boat away. Very informative video, I think it's going to be. But because I've been working on the website, I haven't quite got that edited yet. But maybe I'll have that ready for Sunday. You will know, of course. As well as that, it was quite a challenging extraction of the boat because as soon as there's any sort of waves here in Vasiliki Bay, because we've got this stony beach, the stony beach very quickly becomes like a small cliff, which makes it very hard to pull the boat out of the water single-handed. So I did what I thought is going to be a very entertaining video on what to do when you can't pull your boat out of the water on your own and there's nobody else to help. Very entertaining indeed. Yeah, so but having said that I've just dismantled the 16 as well, of course left the beams attached to the hulls because somebody back in March, I think it was, glued it together, which was very helpful. Made for a stiff boat, but does make taking the boat apart something close to impossible. So I have still got the Minicat, which is in the garage in 2 bags, ready to deploy at the first sniff of a nice day with a bit of wind. So not giving up hope, not at this time. All right, back to the live chat. So Frank is saying a vector of true wind and induced is exactly, that's what we were talking about. All right, we've got young aviators on board. Hello, young aviators say, have you sailed an A-class? No, I've never had the opportunity to sail an A-class, and I am thinking that it is becoming necessary that I get hold of one. Now, A-class sailors out there, especially the flying ones, is the wind that we get here in Vasiliki Bay going to work for the foiling A-class? Because I know that when it gets windy, it starts getting a bit emotional on these foiling boats. So is this kind of 10 knots of wind enough to get her up on the foils? That's what we need to know, because then it seems like the light wind mornings here in Vasiliki Bay could quickly become a bit more similar to the afternoons, and we could be laying down some big speeds even in the lighter wind. That would be exciting. Also exciting with regards to the A-class is I did just do my first A-class t-shirt design over at totaljoyrider.com. Brand new website just up. Very exciting for me. Perhaps more for me than anyone else. But it's all there. It's all there. Good to have you on board anyway, young aviators. We've got Marty on board in dark and foggy Sempa, or is that Sempash in Switzerland? Yeah, golly. Okay, we've got Dan in Hawaii. No season change apparent over there. Yes, let's all nip over to Hawaii for some champagne sailing. Or Duke is on board. Duke needs a crew. All right, here we go. Let's see if we can find Duke someone to crew with him. Can you ask? Need a crew in Southern California, USA. All right, so if you happen to be in Southern California, USA, or near enough to there to go for a sail with Duke, then get on board. All right. Who else? We got Stephen says, practicing hull flying after your tips 2 weeks ago. Each to their own. I prefer the main sheet ratchet off. Yeah, each to his own. I like to have the ratchet on the main sheet switched on, just because I like the way it feels and I like the way it sounds. Unless the wind's quite light, depends on your system as well, how chewy, that's the word that I like to use, but you might say grippy is the ratchet on your main sheet. With the main sheets that I use, they're not so chewy to mean that it's not going to go out very nicely with the ratchet switched on. So I like to have the ratchet switched on most of the time, unless the wind is kind of like below 6 knots, and then I might be inclined to turn the ratchet off. But good luck to you flying a hull. Okay, Frank from Clearwater, Florida says, I only know Lee from these live chat situations. All right, good to know. All right, we got Christian on board in, what would that be? British Columbia, I think, in Canada. Good to have you with us, Christian. Hans is with us in Germany. Very interested in the foiling A class indeed. Oh, yes. All right, we got Eric with us in Melbourne, Florida. Eric's been sending it a fair bit on the F18 of late. Just became wetsuit time here in Melbourne, Florida. 16 to 18 miles an hour today. Woohoo! Heading out in an hour. Nice. That is the bonus of it being the morning where you are. Whereas here, it's already dark. Weird. We're, you know, as well as talking about catamaran sailing here on Joyrider TV, we're also taking a deep dive into time travel. Whew, on a Friday afternoon or morning, or it might even be getting on for Saturday morning already for those of you on the other side. Nice. All right, young aviators, say, I've got an old 2016 DNA Aclass, and 10 to 15 knots of wind is the perfect wind to go sailing out on the acat for the foiling one. Good to know. All right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna start poking what I would consider to be the right people to see if I can at least have a go. But to actually get my hands on one would be amazing. All right, so on to part 2 of Rich's preloaded question. Okay, when writing a capsized catamaran, what's the best setting for the main sheet and the traveller? I think you recommended keeping the traveller central, the main sheet out once the boat. So yes, okay. I can't read and talk, so it seems. But here we go. Yes. So when writing your catamaran, especially, this is a big especially if your catamaran has a self-tacking jib. So what we're trying to do is when we get the boat up from capsized, that the boat doesn't then bear away and start sailing off while we're still in the water trying to get on. Because for those of you who've experienced it, the boat sailing away while you're hanging on to the Dolphin striker trying to get back onto it is a horrible experience. And it is, even with the boat only going at like 5-6 knots boat speed, it is nearly impossible to get back on once your feet are out dragging behind you, because the boat is sailing off, or if they'll be dragging kind of in front of you, but you'll be going backwards. That would be the situation. So what we're trying to do before we right the capsized boat is we're trying to set the mainsail, well, and the jib to avoid the boat, do what we can to prevent the boat from sailing off while we haven't yet got back onto the boat. So we can do this with our main sheet, traveller and jib settings. So the first one, and probably the most obvious, is let off as much jib sheet as you can before you bring the boat back upright. Because if the jib is on, as we know, if we've got our jib sheeted in, it's pulling, and we're not using it to sail forwards, it's pulling the front of the boat away from the wind, which is going to start us sailing. So we're going to have the jib as loose as possible before we right the capsized boat. Next thing we want to do is to make sure that the main sheet is loose. So we're going with the loose main sheet. The reason that we're going to loosen the main sheet is because if you've got any water inside the mainsail, like if the mainsail's been under the water a bit, then that is going to be like a load of weight on the rig, which is going to prevent us from bringing the boat upright in the first place. But the second thing is, maybe some of you have experienced this thing where you pull the boat upright, and even though you grab onto the Dolphin striker on the new side, the boat flips over the other way. I'm sorry about that. Which we can avoid somewhat by letting the main sheet off before we right the capsized boat. In fact, probably the first thing you should do once you get onto the boat for righting is to let off the main sheet. That's better. Some sort of foreign object as is hitching a ride. But all right, so the interesting thing is what we're going to do with the Traveller before we right the capsized boat. So traditionally, people would say let the Traveller off completely as well, because that is also going to stop the boat from wanting to flip over the other way once it's upright. But especially on the boats with the self-tacking jib, which the problem with the self-tacking jib, here's our track, is with this system of jib, we're not able to free off as much sheet as you're able to with a traditional jib system, which means the jib is always going to have a little bit of pull to it. Yeah, so we really need, what we need once the boat is upright is to have a little bit of pressure in the leech of the mainsail once the boat is upright, because as we know from these Q&A sessions, for those of you who've been paying attention, is if we've got a bit of pressure in the leech of the mainsail, what that is going to do to the course of the boat is it's going to encourage the boat to turn up towards the wind, which in theory is going to stop the boat from trying to bear away and have you sort of doing a bit of backwards water skiing from the Dolphin striker, which is never a fun time. So Traveller in the middle, main sheet loose, jib loose before righting the capsize, and that should mean when you pull the boat upright, it will have more of a natural tendency to turn into the wind rather than away from the wind. With certain types of boat, you might even find that you don't want to totally loosen the main sheet as well. You might only want to loosen like half of the main sheet, because you might feel, oh, the boat still wants to bear away. Well, have a bit of main sheet in. But in my experience, having that completely loose is enough. And then if it's a strong wind, strong enough that we've capsized properly, perhaps strong enough that we've been double trapezing, then definitely let the downhaul off as well before you bring the boat back upright, because that is going to stop the mainsail flogging when you bring it back upright, which when the mainsail's flogging, it makes it all noisy. The boat's going to jump around. If you're sailing with someone less experienced, they're going to find it a very intimidating situation to be in if it's very lively. By letting off the downhaul, it's not going to be lively, and it's going to be much more peaceful when you bring the boat back upright. Top tip. There we go. All right. So, yes, there we go. I think that is the size of it there, Rich. Hope that helps on your F16. It's another boat I'd love to have a spin on, actually, is an F16. They must be very lively indeed. Love it. All right. So we've got Has Racing on board as well. Hello, Has Racing. Talking about that A-Class. It's a lot of fun. Thankfully, we have not experienced that with the A-Class yet. Oh, this water skiing underneath the Dolphin striker. And Has Racing continues. Have you ever had a boat sail away from you? Yes, I have. All right, let's think if that's true. Yeah, I've fallen off the boat while I was meant to be trapezing before, and yes, the boat did sail off. And fortunately, my crew was quick-witted enough. That was David. You might have seen the video, to grab the stick, turn the boat round, and come and pick me up. Very nice of him. But I did the year before last. I did some extensive testing of what happens when you fall off the boat in a variety of wind conditions and situations. And it actually turned out that one of the most sketchy, I'm going to call it, which is kind of like dangerous situations, is actually in lighter wind, when perhaps you're sailing downwind or reaching. So you've got the main sheet out and you're probably relaxed. You're probably not holding on to the main sheet if you're just out cruising. If you fall off the boat in those light winds, because you haven't got tension in the main sheet, it's likely, if you've got a jib as well, it's likely the boat is just going to keep sailing. Might not be sailing very fast, but if it's going downwind, light winds, I'd say it's probably going to be doing 6 knots of boat speed, perhaps, which is faster than most people can swim, I believe. Answers on a postcard as well. Haven't actually researched what the average swimming speed is, but I don't think it's 6 knots. I think that would be pretty quick. Yeah, so you could very easily, in light winds especially, lose touch with the boat. Whereas in stronger winds, if you fall off the boat completely, yes, the boat is going to sail off away from you, but then it's much more likely to do something. If the main's in reasonably tight, it might just head up into the wind and stop. Or if the main's in really tight, it'll probably capsize. Or what we found the best thing to do is to make sure you don't let go of the main sheet. And then as the boat sails away from you, because you're holding the main sheet's going to naturally sheet in with the weight of the boat pulling away from you, which is either going to capsize the boat immediately, so you can just reel yourself back to the boat, or the boat's going to head up into the wind and stop. So don't let go of the main sheet. Or if you are going for a bit of open sea sailing, no safety cover, then the tether. Yes, this snap shackle is bigger than necessary, but have something like this attached to your trapeze harness, then into this part of the snap shackle. After doing a load of testing, and yes, made video on this as well, I found that by putting the loop of the main sheet and traveler into here, and I jumped off the boat while sailing at speed. I even tested what it's like to pitch pole the boat. This was probably the most daunting test I've ever done, but what it's like to pitch pole the boat whilst hooked in with your main sheet and traveler, and it was okay. Not saying I liked it, but it was okay. But that means that you're definitely attached to the boat. The only downside of this means you do have to be slightly mindful when crossing the boat for a tack or a jibe, just not to get all twisted up in the rope. And I suppose the other downside is you're perhaps a little bit more likely to get caught up in the main sheet and traveler, or if you do capsize and you find yourself in the water, you have to release from that to make sure you are not going to get caught up in that rope. There we go. All right. Duke in Southern California says our sailing club is turning into A-class club. We now have 6 A-classes in the fleet. Very nice. Has Racing, on the topic of the A-class, says with the A-class, if it runs away and capsizes or heads up into the wind, you cannot catch it because it runs away so quickly if you are not tethered. Yeah, good to know. So to finalize this point, just make sure you're holding on when you're sailing. Never let go of the main sheet. Always have the main sheet in your hand. Marty in Switzerland says, the snap shackle idea is great. I use it all the time for solo sailing, but my shackle is a lot smaller than that one you have. They're quite pricey, but worth it. Yeah, this one must have cost a fortune. I don't even know how it came into my possession, but usually the sort of size snap shackle you want is probably going to come in at about 25-30 units of currency, whatever currency it is that you choose. All right, got Lynn and Pete. We used to have 12 A classes at Rutland Sailing Club. Yeah, I remember the days when Rutland was like an A class stronghold in the UK. Yeah, I dare say from that comment, it's no longer the case. Sad times. All right, back to the preloaded. Okay, and this next preloaded question comes from Ian Elwell 8000. Who says, all right, and this is the question that always leaves me feeling like I really should know, but it seems like there is no actual definitive information on this anywhere. So Ian says, could you run us through setting up the Hobie 16 Dolphin Striker tension? Yeah. So yeah, I've still not got anything definitive on the Hobie 16 Dolphin Striker. If you're not familiar with what a Dolphin Striker is, if this is our front beam, there we've got a hole there and a hole there, then to give the front beam some strength and support, we have one rod that comes down directly under the mast. And then from there, we have a bar that goes to both sides, and it's possible to adjust the tension in this bar. So as we tighten on a 16, the way it adjusts is you've got a nut here and a nut here. So if you tighten those nuts, it puts more tension into this bar. And as you tension it more, it pushes the middle of the beam upwards. Okay, so the two sides of Dolphin Striker, why it's necessary to have it in kind of the sweet spot. If your Dolphin Striker is too loose, and if it is too loose, the way that you'll know that it's too loose is when you give it a little whack with your hand, it will rattle. If your Dolphin Striker rattles, it is too loose. Now, what's the problem with it being too loose? Well, there is an absolute, maybe it is actually a ton of pressure coming down the mast. And if your Dolphin Striker is too loose, it will not be supporting your front beam enough from this pressure in the mast, which is going to eventually mean your front beam is going to crack here, which it, with the Dolphin Striker being there, unless it comes off completely, is it actually going to snap in half while you're sailing? I think if you're in sailing in big waves with a lot of wind, maybe, but unless you're in that situation, you'd know. It would probably give you a warning massive crack, which would be very disturbing before it actually snaps completely. So, but that is why if you've got a rattling Dolphin Striker, you do need to put some tension into it. And it doesn't take much on these nuts to make a big difference. So kind of like a quarter of a turn on both sides, that might be enough to go from rattling to what they say at the factory is the sweet spot, is when you give it a whack with your hand, it gives a, like, what would you call it, a resonant hum kind of bit of feedback. So what is the downside of your Dolphin striker being too tight? What I'm told by ex-world champion and great guy Gavin Colby is if you tighten it too much, you'll actually put creases in your front beam here and here. And what it also does is when you tighten it more, it pushes up here, which actually, we did find this with one of our 16s at Wildwind, because it had a crack underneath the mast base. And I thought, we don't want that cracking anymore. Let's wind on the Dolphin striker a bit. And didn't wind it on too much. But what happened, very strangely, was the rigging appeared to get shorter. Why was this? It's because we were moving the mast upwards, up in the air, because we're bending the beam more, which was effectively making the rigging shorter. Very interesting. As well as that, the actual alignment of the hulls, we got have I got so the hulls, sorry, this is a hull like this. The hulls normally would be like this, but as we tighten the Dolphin striker, what's going to happen is by that going up, we're kind of shortening the width of the front beam. So your hulls are going to start to be kind of towed in like this. So there is definitely going to be a sweet spot for the Dolphin striker, but can anybody say what it is? I don't know. You'd think that there would be a measurement, like if you put a line between the bottom of the castings and the middle, they'll say, all right, this is definitely what it needs to be. But I think it is quite possibly because there's a bit of tolerance involved when the boats are actually built. So they can't definitively say this is the measurement that you need at that point for your Dolphin striker tension. That is what I think. All right, there we go. I hope that helps a bit. I know it doesn't help much. I was hoping for more. Okay, so Duke says, Southern California, they just have one foiling A-class at that club there. Okay, and Lynn and Pete at Rutland said the fleet started to break up once it split into foilers and non-foilers. Yeah, this is often the problem with, like, when a fleet gets diluted by having different versions of the same boat. Some people want to change. They want to be at the cutting edge of technology, or at least towards the cutting edge. And some people are quite happy with what they've got. They don't want to change. And then before you know it, your healthy fleet has been cut in half, which is always a shame. All right. So Stephen, yeah, it says he's just looking through the Hobie 16 performance manual. Nothing in there on the Dolphin striker. Duke says maybe some kind of torque setting for the Dolphin striker with your torque wrench. Yeah. All good. A good suggestion. All right. So next preloaded question. By the way, if you could just take the time to hit the like button while you're there. Cheers. Lovely old job. This question comes from Taylor, who's racing a Hobie Tiger or a Hobie 14 Turbo, depending on whether he's got a crew or not. For the Tiger, most of the videos on the F18 suggest that on the downwind leg with the Spinnaker up, the main and the jib should be in tight. Okay, so that is point number one. Should the main and jib be in tight with the spinnaker up in all conditions? This is a very good start to a question. All right, hold on, just tidying up a bit. Hope you don't mind. Nice to get it all fresh. Taylor then continues, and the main should be in to protect the mast. Also, the boat should be generating enough apparent wind that the sails are set in upwind position, even when sailing downwind. Taylor says, I find in light conditions, say 5 to 10 knots of wind, I can't generate enough apparent wind, and it doesn't feel good. He's got the only spinnaker boat in the fleet, which is comprised mostly of Hobie 16s and 18s, so no one to compare to. All right, here we go. So where do we start with this? All right, the jib. We'll just get the jib covered. When you're using the spinnaker with the jib, the optimal place for the jib to be set is with the telltales on the jib flying correctly, like they would be if you were sailing with two sails. Because we're going to be using a spinnaker, it does mean that our apparent wind is going to be much further forwards, like if we use this for apparent wind. So our normal apparent wind on the downwind is going to be here, whereas with the spinnaker, same course, our apparent wind is quite likely to be back here, let's say in 8 knots of wind. So it does mean the jib doesn't have to go out quite so far, but yes, you should certainly ease the jib when flying the spinnaker. If you've seen videos on Joyrider TV of the jib not being eased on the downwind, it was either because it was really, really windy, and when it is really windy, the apparent wind on the downwind is such that you hardly have to ease the jib at all for the downwind leg. Or if it was light wind and the jib wasn't eased, I would say this is just bad practice. Apologies. So that is the jib. Set the jib as you would do normally. Of course, you've got to find your kind of opportunity to tune as the crew to trim the jib as well as trimming the spinnaker. So as you get more use to your boat in certain wind strengths, you'll kind of start to have a fairly good idea of, okay, we haven't been trapezing upwind. This means before we hoist the spinnaker, I'm going to ease that much jib sheet. That would be the right amount. Kind of that kind of vibe. And then, all right, we've been double trapezing downhaul on upwind. So on the downwind, I only need to ease that much jib. Otherwise, it's going to flap once we get going. So at the time of hoisting the spinnaker, you're going to be sailing quite, let's use a little fella, we're going to be sailing a bit deeper, which means if we were to keep the jib in the correct position on that point of sail, then yes, we would want to ease it out quite a lot. But then once the spinnaker's up, we're going to turn back towards the wind to get it going, which means we'd have to pull the jib in again, which is an extra job that we would rather not have to do. So for that reason, that is why often the jib gets a little bit neglected at the time of the hoist. It's no excuse though. Poor. Okay, so mainsail settings. In light conditions, yes, you should ease the main sheet out. So if you haven't, I'd say as a rule, if you haven't been double trapezing upwind, now don't quote me on this if you break your mast, but if you haven't been double trapezing upwind, you don't need to have all right, let's rephrase that because this is important. If it hasn't been windy enough to double trapeze upwind, you know, it might have been windy enough, but you might have decided it was quite lumpy and big waves and you just prefer to sit on the boat. All right, that's not what I'm talking about. If the wind is strong enough to double trapeze upwind, then yes, once you've got your spinnaker up, it is certainly necessary to crank the main sheet in. What's a good length mast here? Here we go. There's our length mast. And as we've said before, the reason we're cranking the main sheet in is because by cranking the main sheet in, it's pulling the mast backwards, which is giving the mast support against the spinnaker, which is pulling the mast forwards. And because where the spinnaker is, where the halyard is anchored at the top of the mast, is above the hounds. This is the hounds where the shrouds are attached. You know, if it was pulling from here, it wouldn't be an issue because the shrouds would supply the support that we need. But because it's pulling from higher up, it is necessary to crank the main sheet in once you get to that amount of wind. But it's not only for the support of the mast, it is also because if we have the main sheet eased at all, it's going to create drag because the actual wind the wind that is blowing down the boat. Here's our boat bowsprit, like that. We're going to have sails in a different color. Everyone loves a red spinnaker these days, so it seems. Check out the range of red spinnaker t-shirts on Joyrider, on totaljoyrider.com. Very nice. So what happens is, you know, the front edge of the wind of the sail, in theory, is in the same direction as our apparent wind. And then as it goes down the boat, this gets sort of bent round, which actually means the wind at this part of the boat is almost head to wind once it's windy, which means if your mainsail is anything other than cranked, like if you've got your mainsail out a bit, you're actually going to be creating drag, which is slowing the boat down. You're going to have turbulence all around here, which is slowing the boat down. And the way that we control the power on the downwind, especially with the spinnaker up, is by sailing fast. Speed is your friend. Yes, we've heard that before, and we'll hear it again at some point. So that is when it's windy. But in light winds, we don't need to have this cranked in as much because we're not going that fast. The wind isn't being bent round like this at this point of the sail. So what are we going to do is, all right, so in, let's say, wind between 4 knots and 8 knots, we're going to keep the traveller kind of central, yeah? Or let's just call it central. Traveller central, and we're just going to use the main sheet to adjust the shape of the mainsail. How much main sheet? Well, what we're going to make sure is on our mainsail, we have got leech telltales. These are going to tell us what we need to know. Now, what do we need to know from these leech telltales? What these are telling us is at that part of the sail, it's not in too tight. Once a leech telltale disappears, so if we look at the sail from the top, are we all having a good time here? I'm having a lovely time. say, if we look at the sail from the top, let's do the leech telltale in red. Is that coming through? Oh no, that looks the same color. All right, not to worry. So if we've got more wind coming over the back than the front, so if the mainsail is either in the sweet spot or not in tight enough, this leech telltale is just going to keep flying. However, if we have the sail in too tight, let's say this is what the wind direction is going to be like with the sail in too tight. So the wind is going to be like a bit turbulent on the windward side, and then it's going to kind of blow off this way. And that is going to blow that leech telltale round the back of the sail. So we are no longer going to be able to see it. So how do we use these telltales in actual practice? The way we use them is we're just trying to trim the sail so that the bottom of these 4 leech telltales has disappeared round the back. Yes, that means that bottom one is going to be slightly oversheeted, but that is how we're keeping the mainsail in the sweet spot. In light winds, this is going to mean that a good way that I use to gauge how much main sheet you've got in as a quick reference kind of thing, this is our back beam, here are holes, is if there's the boom, then we can actually just gauge it by looking at the angle between the blocks. So you might start off on your downwind with your blocks at an angle of 45 degrees to each other. So that's pretty loose. But then as you start to get the boat going, as it starts to get faster, you're going to have to start sheeting in. Not so that it's bar tight, but so that it's pretty tight, even in light winds. But you definitely need to be responsive with the main sheet. So if the boat slows down, you ease the main sheet out, check your telltales. And as the boat starts picking up speed, you start bringing the main sheet in. Now, in less than 4 knots of wind, less than 5 knots of wind, I let the traveller out about 1 inch or 2. And this isn't for the sail shape or trim. This is because in super light wind like that, here's our boat, super light wind, the place where we want to be sitting on the boat as the helm is in towards the mast. We got something we can so we want to be like sitting in here, and if your traveller is in the middle and your main sheet is in the middle, this means you can't actually steer. So we just let the traveller out a little bit to allow us to steer. So there we go. I think that is what I would like to say on the topic of main sheet tension in light winds with the Spinnaker up. But you have to be very reactive. Like the Spinnaker sheet should be getting eased all of the time, watching the front of the Spinnaker as it curls, just bringing it back in a little bit. And it's almost the same with the main sheet, but not as much, because as the helm, you need to be looking at where you're going and trying to keep your course as stable as possible. There we go. All right. So at this time, we have been going for over 1 hour. So no further questions, please. I'm just going to finish off what we've got in the live chat. Of course, if you do want to ask a question, if you've got something you've been meaning to get off your chest, if you would like to combine it with a super sticker, then you're very welcome. Super stickers are available for everyone, of course. If you feel that this information has been nothing short of solid gold, which of course it has. All right, so where are we up to? Oh, we got Robbie on board in the live chat. Yeah, Robbie's been laying down some big speeds on the Nacra 20 in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Great stuff. Robbie says, have you heard anything about the new Nacra into 20s? Nacra say they're making a new one, same hull design and the same mast and rigging as the Carbon 20. Wow, with fiberglass hulls and straight boards instead of foiling boards as used on the 20. Wow, that would be a very cool boat to get hold of. I'll be getting in touch with Nacra to see if I can jump on one, get the cameras rolling. I think it's about time to be taking a trip to the Netherlands. That's where Holland is, where Nacra's kind of stronghold is. I think probably globally it must be the center of operations, I believe. All right, so young aviators, say a few months ago we bought designs for a 3D printed radio controlled trimaran. I got bored, and this evening the non-foiling tri is now flying above the waves. Nowhere in the rules does it say it can't. Nice. Yeah. Get your radio controlled trimaran foiling this weekend. All right. Has Racing says, I'm definitely enjoying the techie stuff. I'm subscribing. Great to hear it. Just out of interest, Has Racing, where are you in the world? It's nice to know. Let us know. All right. We've got Mr. Tony KP on board in Ebeltoft, Denmark. Nice to have you with us as always. All right. Has Racing says the batten tension and stiffness also matters a lot. Oh, yes. All right. But we're not going to go into that right now because I'm, you know, deep down, I'm ready to start winding this up. I'm not going to lie to you. It's time for a drink here on Lefkas Greece. It's that time of day. Duke says, great Spinnaker tips. Glad that you enjoyed that, Duke. All right. Robbie says, I believe they're trying to stoke the 20 class back up, targeting 30 grand price for fiberglass instead of the Mercedes-Benz pricing of the foiling Carbon 20s. All right. Has Racing is in Valencia, Spain. Nice. All right. Great to have you on board, and welcome to the global Joyrider TV community, where incidentally, on that note, yes, there's a brand new Total Joyrider website. It is up and running. And if you're thinking of supporting Joyrider TV, then a great way of doing that would be to pick up a t-shirt, hoodie, or anything else that I happen to have for sale over there at the totaljoyrider.com store. Everything going on at totaljoyrider.com. It's all me. It's all Joyrider TV. I'm a one-man show. That man is me. And that's all that I've been doing all of this week, is getting that ready. Great Christmas gift ideas there as well. Even if your mum doesn't sail, she would love a Nacra 17 hoodie. She told me. It's true. All right, there we go. All right, Robbie says, thanks for all the great Spinnaker tips. Been heaps of awesome executable information. Nice one. Okay, great to have you on board. And everybody else, thanks for coming along. And maybe I'll have this next video ready for Sunday. Otherwise, I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV. Check out the new website. Let me know what you think. Just put it in the comments somewhere. I will see them. Thank you and goodbye.